Now, please welcome Professor Dr. Dimitrios Buhalis, who is the visiting professor at the School of Hotel and Tourism Management at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, for the next presentation. Thank you very much, Professor Dimitrios. Oh, you're currently on mute, Professor.
Hello, great to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation. And I've been enjoying the colleagues that they were speaking before me because a lot of the conversations that we have will be very, very similar. And also I'll try to build on top of what they were saying before. Let me start my presentation and see what I can share with you. So I'm going to talk about smart tourism and nowness and the ambient tourism within the framework of the restarting of tourism that we are facing currently. I'm currently on sabbatical in Hong Kong Polytechnic University, away from my base in Bournemouth. And I'm going to explain to you how also I traveled during this period. But before we start, I think I like to play this little video that is from British Airways because it demonstrates the anticipation that we all have for traveling. If I can have the video, please.
Good morning, this is your captain speaking.
Here we go.
This fly. For us, it's you.
Thank you very much. So this has been a very, very difficult year, and everybody understands how critical tourism is for many communities around the world. And we had great presentations. Now, what has happened in the last year is that a lot of people moved to different types of holidays, different kind of transportation, and a lot of land transportation gained a lot of power, especially in places where the infrastructure is quite significant, and they had fast trains and they had the opportunity to actually access to these things. In Bournemouth, where I normally live, the domestic tourism and the staycation was phenomenal because a lot of the British tourists did not travel overseas, but they came to Bournemouth to kind of holiday. And you could see some of these kind of situations over the summer where a lot of people enjoy the sea and the seaside and they enjoy the local facilities. And nearby the New Forest again, saw a lot of people traveling to those places. Now, many governments prioritized access to vaccines, especially for people who are traveling and in aviation and those tourism professionals. And I'm very glad that I heard Professor Virasanki talking about how vaccines are critical in developing the ability to travel again, and how it is important that we adopt ethical kind of practices in terms of who is using the vaccines and how the vaccines are becoming available to all groups, not only the very privileged ones. And Singapore Airlines was one of these airlines that suggested that all the operating flights were operated by vaccinated crews and increased the confidence of people who were traveling. Now, after every crisis, there is a rainbow. After every storm, there is a rainbow. And I think we're gradually and slowly going to that kind of area. where I'd like to see a little bit of optimism. And the optimism came from the opportunity that we had to protect ourselves. And Dr. Virasandi talked about the different kind of vaccinations and the yellow passport we had. And as soon as I got my passport, I had to go back to Greece, where I'm coming from originally, and see family and celebrate the end of a very difficult period, which for me was quite successful and quite productive, because I did the Encyclopedia of Tourism Management and Marketing. And as you can see, I visited Naxos to celebrate and close the project at the Portara, which it's on the top of the encyclopedia, and celebrate the end of this journey. Now, the encyclopedia, what it brings together, it looks into how the tourism system is becoming a tourism pyramid, where you've got on top of the tourism system and the resources that we use to generate tourism, the tourism system is based on a much more comprehensive kind of theoretical framework that includes the planning, the management, and the strategy for tourism, looking to all the market forces, look at the exogenous variables, and look at the technology and the infrastructure that's required for all of these things to work together. You can see the links, and you can download the links, and you can download a lot of information, because I don't have the time to deal with that right now. But I think it's now more than ever that we need to understand the tourism strategy and the tourism theory in order to be able to support destinations and professionals around the world, and also governments, to understand how can we manage our resources in the best possible way, how we can engage with all the different stakeholders, and how can we identify opportunities to move forward with suggestions and strategies that they are sustainable, they bring competitive advantage, and they're engaging different players in the marketplace. And I think when you're looking to destinations around the world, we are talking about how destinations can develop competitive advantage, primarily through differentiation and building them destination image and their reputation, by nurturing new business models through innovation and investment, and focusing on resource optimization. And all of that we're doing for the benefit of all the stakeholders, and primarily the residents who own the resources at this particular destination. Now, the good news is that the COVID has disrupted dramatically everything we do, but actually we are blessed that we still have the assets, and we still have the brands, the products, and all of those things that enable us to co-create experience with local residents and tourists towards differentiated experiences that they can be authentic, and it can support people to enjoy themselves. But I think what needs to be realized is that we need to look forward. The past is becoming irrelevant. And what needs to happen is to understand what is that we need to do in the future. Now, one of the things that has seen tourism development, and that has been reflected on tourism academia, is long periods of planning, partly because to develop infrastructures like airports or to develop hotels, we need a significant period of time, quite often more than 10 years. And I think what we realized in the last 2 years is that a lot of our activity needs to be managed within a window of 2 weeks. So the long-term planning became almost a 2 weeks period, because the 2 weeks period is all that we had, that we can have clarity about what we could do. And so we saw the need for smart and agile tourism that is focused on resilience, and that resilience was primarily driven by the local situations and the contextual information that we're having in different places. Places around the world, they were desperate to restart tourism, and a lot of guides and a lot of tourism professionals they depend all their livelihood on these things. So they were desperate to bring people tourism and tourists back and to see people coming to their resorts. And they kind of change the regulations frequently in order to be able to manage them. Now, there are three different strategies, if you like, in how destinations have managed tourism. One is the zero COVID strategy, which applies in Hong Kong, in China, and increasingly in Australia and New Zealand and many other places. So this is when I was traveling to Hong Kong from London, where everybody was really afraid of the different kind of implications that COVID had, and the restrictions were very, very difficult. I had to quarantine for 3 weeks, and I was teaching from my room and kind of was making whatever I could in order to manage the situation. And eventually, after 3 weeks, I was discharged, and I was able to move on and go into a real class, which is an incredible feeling after 2 years to go and provide education to real people in a real class. And I think our students were so desperate also to see our teachers to come forward and engage in this conversation and enjoy the face-to-face educational experience. And many of you will know that I spend most of my life talking about technology and strategy on digitization. But actually nothing replaces the feeling of getting in a class and speaking to young people and engaging in this conversation and managing this conversation and this co-creation of knowledge that we can achieve together. Now, smartness, of course, is going to give us the tools to take things forward. And smartness takes advantage of the interconnectivity and interoperability of integrated technologies to re-engineer process and data in order to produce innovative services, products, and procedures towards maximizing the value for all the stakeholders. Smartness is not about technology. Smartness is about re-engineering networks and ecosystems, bring all of those things together and redevelop processes and services in real time to engage with all the stakeholders. Now, what COVID actually did was pushing us to change the way that we're doing smartness and bring a whole range of other players that we didn't have in the past in that smart ecosystem, and forcing us to actually operate with all the different players in a way that we can maximize the benefits for all, and more importantly, to remain safe and to ensure that the security, not only of the tourists, not only of the service providers, but also the local residents was very, very important. And what really COVID gave us the opportunity to do, or actually didn't give us the opportunity, it forced us to do, is to look into the ecosystems and connect all the technological networks and all the different players in a way that we can use digitization and innovation much faster than anything else. So what COVID has effectively done is move digitization through the application on smartphones, through the banking systems, through progressing governments to operate in different ways for more than 10 years than it was before. So COVID has forced smartness and digitization. Smartness brings agility through networks that are interoperable and interconnected, using the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything. We need sensors and beacons to collect and distribute data, and we need to analyze big data and data analytics in real time and co-create experiences and co-create solutions in real time. And you could see that because not only we were doing that to improve the experience of travelers, but also to make sure that there's safety and make sure that we understood what was the epidemiological conditions and data and take measures accordingly. Now, smartness is not only about automation, information technology, digitization, evolution of social media or reservations. Smartness is much more than that because it engages a whole range of different players and is giving us the opportunity to engage with all the stakeholders. So this is when we are talking about co-creation of experiences. And this is when we are discussing about how the companies and the tourism suppliers can bring solutions and value to the marketplace and then meet the right customer to create that personalized experience. This has always been the case, and we've always done it offline, but now what we've got is we've got a range of technological innovations that they are supporting this on top of the face-to-face kind of environment. Now, as I said, smartness is not only about technology, it's about people, it's about leadership coming together into that ecosystem of value co-creation where economic actors meet social actors and technological actors. And what we've got currently is also actors that are coming from the health service and medical professionals and create a range of smart innovations by developing products and services that they are specifically available and applicable to those people who are traveling during this period. Those technologies are synthesizing innovations, and those innovations are coming to the marketplace to bring together on the supply on the one side and the demand on the other side, and create that kind of space of interconnection and the space of value co-creation. This is required because a lot of the customers are already asking for personalized, contextualized, and individualized experiences. And we are doing that in order to bring the resources and the customer needs and requirements closer together. Now, what COVID has done is two things. One is has brought more innovation, more technology in the hands of the customers and made customers much more confident to actually deal with a range of different players. And also, it has enabled the service providers to rethink how they are doing things. There's a lot of contactless services for the time being that are coming out. And this is when we start thinking, do we really need receptions, and do we need people to go and register in the reception and do all the manual kind of things? Or have we got sufficient technology to support that interactivity before people are coming in? And if you do that, how can you redesign the experience and the co-creation based on this kind of situation before traveling, during traveling, and after traveling? And I've got to tell you that being for 3 weeks in quarantine for 21 days, you need to actually plan for this, and you start the travel experience before you go into this room that you cannot get out. And what you're doing those 21 days is actually predetermined by how prepared you were and how the hotel or the host who is actually providing the service for you is connected in order to be able to manage the situation. We need to understand the internal context about the individuals and the external context that we're facing. Of course, COVID messed around with our external context. But we also need to understand who is the traveler, what kind of needs and requirements they've got, what kind of lifestyle have they got. So on my quarantine, we had a lady who was a yoga instructor, and she started a program every day at 7 o'clock, teaching all of us yoga because we are all confined in our rooms. So her internal resource was made available, and we engaged in a lot of things because we end up being prisoners in the same place. So social media, context-based and mobile are coming together to support that kind of interactivity in that kind of ecosystem and determine the value that we co-creating during this period. Now, because of COVID, they also determined the restrictions that we had and what we could do and what we could not do. And I've experienced a range of different activities that they demonstrate incredible solidarity in incredible selflessness and support from fellow travelers. And I think it's really critical to understand also how innovation networks work, because at the time of crisis, networks are much more critical in order to provide the services that we need and in order to engage in different people. Now, big data is also critical here to empower that agility, especially in the dynamic, volatile, and time-sensitive kind of situation that we found ourselves to be. Because the data keep changing. For example, flights were canceled, requirements were changed, hotel rooms were very dynamic, and all of those things were changing instantly, challenging consumers and their ability to interact with the environment. I think ultimately what you have is an ecosystem that's emerging and become much more agile and dynamic, where information that's coming from consumers and the supply side is going up on the cloud, and then it's coming as a storm of value to consumers. Now, many of you may have heard me talk about that in the past, and the value in the past was to have a better experience, to be personalized, to be individualized, and enhance the experience of people. But now, one of the key things is safety and security. Can I be safe? Can I use the data to understand where I can go and where I cannot go, and how I can optimize my travel within the constraints that we've got, that all of a sudden became much more. And this is something that we've done with Daisy Fun about whether people are having face-to-face social contacts and whether they've got online social contacts. And again, that line used to be kind of absolute, because people will choose whether they've got face-to-face social contact or they had online contact. But now when you're on quarantine, you are forced to have online contact. And because of that, we progressed dramatically in that environment. So where we had the typology where people had the option to be part of this typology, now we are in a situation where people may be forced by the context and the conditions to be part of this and actually communicate in a different way. And then the burden is coming to us to support the ability of those individuals to co-create value within the conditions that they've got currently. And one of the things that we've seen more and more is robots and robotics. And I'm not going to play this video, which is about how Amazon is using robotics to manage their facilities. But increasingly, you'll see robots serving consumers. And this a picture I took 2 years ago in Hangzhou, where this little robot was following me around and was doing different things. And this is a picture I took last week at K11 here in Hong Kong, where this robot is going around disinfecting everything and being friendly. And then you've got another robot that is creating cocktails for you. And if you are doing a cocktail, then they start dancing at the end to show you how wonderful it is that you have taken a cocktail from them. So to conclude, I think we'll see a lot of smart solutions through artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything. And particularly what we'll see is what I call nowness and real-time information. So we're not going to only have location-based services. We're not going to have information that are specific to locations, but we're going to have the element of time. And the element of time is going to be data-driven, consumer-centric, experience-enhancing, real-time co-creation. And that will support what we call instant gratification, where value is being co-created instantly based on the conditions that you've got. Now, in the past, instant value meant that you had the best solution. Increasingly, instant value means that you are safe and you follow the regulations that they are happening in its place. I mean, I'll give you an example in Hong Kong. If you break the quarantine, you're liable to about 6 months in prison and 25,000 Hong Kong dollars penalty. So you need to understand what you do, where you do it, and what you need to understand the real time regulations in order to be able to be legal and safe. And again, this provides a much more comprehensive kind of framework. What creates the change of the context and how nowness provides real-time service enablers and then the value that's being created. So smartness introduces an agile ambient intelligence ecosystem where you've got artificial intelligence, machine learning, ambient connectivity, all coming through Wi-Fi, 5G, a whole range of different things. And ambient intelligence is pushing value in the market, interconnecting environments and marketplaces. Ambient intelligence means that you've got mobile facilitation through portable wireless, networked and location-sensitive and secure devices that provide ubiquitous, interactive, interoperable, distributed and scalable services. And ambient intelligence is embedded, it's context-aware, it's personalized, it's adaptive and anticipatory. So what we'll see is a lot of connectivity between humans, business, governments, consumers, employees, interest groups, local residents, and eventually between machines themselves to facilitate that interactivity and to maximize the value that we are co-creating. And you see here customer centricity, where the customer is right in the middle and you've got all the other things that are coming around to facilitate that interaction. And one of the things that came to my latest book, which is about gamifications, how can we use gamification to maximize value? And how can you use serious gaming in order to train people, tourists or professionals, to understand what they need to do? I know that I've gone through very quickly a lot of those things. And before I finish, I'd like to mention I really liked Dr. Pradeep Kumar's presentation, because he actually explained what all these things mean for education and how we should train our students for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation, Professor Dimitrios. We have a couple of questions coming through, and if you'd like to ask one as well, make sure that you use that little box just in front of the screen. This one comes from Diwi Ika Mariniati, who says, how confident is our tourism in the future due to the current COVID-19 vaccinations, but also the rise of new variants as well?
Well, I'm not an expert on epidemiology, so I don't really qualify to answer this question. But what we've seen this summer is that once people were vaccinated, the possibility of actually getting serious implications was reduced significantly. So if you combine the range of things like vaccination, the masks, the distancing, and all of those things, you are getting into you're reducing the possibility of serious implications. And we've seen this year, in particular in Greece, that Greece went really, really well this year, where a lot of people traveled and they were desperate to have a good experience. And I heard that your question is coming from Indonesia. I was speaking to my colleagues in Bali. And my colleagues in Bali are desperate to restart tourism. My colleagues in the north of Thailand, they're desperate to restart tourism because the implications are phenomenal in terms of feeding their families, feeding the animals. They were telling me that in the north of Thailand, they've got major problems feeding the elephants, because if you do not have the tourism trade, you do not have the money to actually buy the food, and everything goes together. I think for the first time ever, tourism has become top of the agenda of prime ministers and governments around the world. I don't think they've ever realized how important tourism is and how we should engage tourism dynamically. Now, I think it's a political thing, and our doctor colleague said earlier on, when you open. So, for example, in Hong Kong, they're not And in China, in Australia, in New Zealand, they are not really desperate to open. They are just keeping the borders closed. Even from Hong Kong to Macau, where both places have little cases, they still restrict the movement of people. While other places, like in Europe, they've got some protocols in places, and in some other places like Brazil or India, there are no protocols in places. So it will be a political kind of governmental decision based on what we're going to do.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously I'm Australian, so I pay a lot of attention to what's happening in Australia, and it's very much closed for business. The interesting point of all this as well, which Ben yesterday made in his introductory remarks and also in the program book, is the interconnectedness between hotel and tourism management and international education, particularly as many of the students that come to another country like to try out some of the tourism offerings, and also to support the tourism industry as well as workers, particularly in some remote areas. There's a comment that's come through as well from V. J. Kumar, who says, can we also factor in ambient living or ambient stakeholders for sustainable tourism? And that comes from J. Kumar, India.
Yes, I think technology will support sustainability, although there's still some evidence that technology is actually consuming quite a lot of energy. So a lot of the big data farms with a lot of servers, they're consuming a lot of energy, which is not necessarily reflected yet into what we're talking about. Having said that, if you don't have to go to the bank, if you don't have to go to the supermarket, if you do not have to travel distances, then you're reducing your carbon footprint. And I think what we'll see is that we'll need to look into how technological developments can reduce energy consumption and can reduce things that we're consuming. So sustainability and technology development should go hand in hand, and we need science to create the best synergies between the two.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Professor Dimitrios. We've just run out of time. Thank you very much, everyone, for those questions. And again, thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. I'm sure we've just spoken for much longer on your perspectives.
Thank you.